Okay, I think the 30 seconds must be up. Good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be able to join you here today. Today as the local councillor for this project at 150 Harrison, now known as 361 Dovercourt Road. I believe you'll agree, if you had a chance to see the building, that it looks great. It's going to look even better once we're done with all the landscaping improvements in the spring and the new park that is coming this summer as well. But this modular housing initiative builds on the Housing TO 2020-2030 action plan and the need for additional affordable and supportive housing. This need for affordable housing is also addressed in our city's official plan, which outlines the need for vibrant neighborhoods such as this one, with affordable housing choices that meets the needs of everybody in our communities. The official plan also addresses the need for social infrastructure that encourages greater level of equality, equity, and access to social cohesion. And that's what this project brings to this neighborhood as well. As the City of Toronto, we have always committed to providing permanent homes to those who have experienced homelessness, and this has never been more important than it is today. One of the most important features of this initiative is to ensure that residents remain housed successfully. And that is why the need for supports is so essential. So I also want to take the opportunity to thank our partners at CODA and the neighborhood group for providing the services that are going to be offered with this building as well. I also want to thank all the local residents that through these last few months have helped us to shape this project. They're part of our community liaison committee and that are working to welcome the new residents. To all of them, my gratitude as well. And finally, huge welcome to the new residents of 361 Dovercourt that are about to see their homes, to be welcomed to their new homes. We are glad to have you as our neighbors, and we wish you much success in your new home. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mayor Tory, who, as most of you know, has been a champion for housing, but really pushing everybody at the city, staff, councillors, pushing us hard to deliver on this modular housing initiative. Very early in the pandemic, the councillor challenged all of us to move ahead, move quicker, and I think that we have delivered. These projects have been delivered in record time, and he doesn't stop. He doesn't stop challenging us, and fortunately, we've had the federal government come to the table to also provide us the funds to continue to deliver on these projects. So without further ado, thank you, Mayor, for joining us here today, and on to you.
Know whether it was going to be done for me. Thank you very much, Anna. And I want to say how pleased I am to be here today with Julie Zarowitz, the MP for this area, and with you as the local councillor for this area, and as the deputy mayor. And I'll come back to that in a moment because you played a key role yourself in moving all these housing projects forward. And of course, with our friend Parm Gill, who is an MPP and the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. This is a very important day because we're opening another of the first two, the second of the first two modular housing developments in Toronto. And Anna's right. I saw, to be honest, I saw that they'd done this in Vancouver and basically had these projects that went from, a piece of ground to people living in this housing in a matter of months. And I thought to myself, with all the frustration that's sometimes involved in some of the much larger developments that we are undertaking, and we have thousands upon thousands of units presently in the system under construction and otherwise, that we needed to move to both try, as it were, the modular housing approach and prove to ourselves, which I thought was important, that we could do the same thing. And the opening today, following upon the one that happened on Macy Avenue in Scarborough a couple of weeks ago, is proof positive that we can do this. I wish we could be all together in person to see this development. I must tell you that when I went inside 11 Macy and had a tour inside, I was most impressed. I was most impressed at the quality of the people that are going to provide the supports because they were humane, experienced, capable, people who can provide that extra support that we're going to provide in this housing. But I was also very impressed with the inside of the modular housing. I'd been to the plant, because this is Canadian built, in Grimsby with Deputy Mayor Bylov to see where they made this. But I also was incredibly impressed with the finished product. And I saw them tell us that it was all shipped with the furniture inside it. And indeed, when we walked in, there was the furniture all there, and everything was looking very homey, if I can use that expression. You know, it really looked like a home for the people that are going to be resident there. This site, as some people will know, was the site of a former 14th Division police station. But now it will be a home for people who have special needs in their lives. And I'm proud of that we could take a piece of land that was no longer required for its original purpose and repurpose it. And we did that with, as Deputy Mayor Bylov suggested, the help and the assistance and the wise counsel of the local residents, because they've helped us to make this a better development. And indeed, like all developments that happen kind of in the early part of the winter, it will look much better in the spring when we can get on with things like the landscaping. But in the meantime, we do have at this site 44 studio apartments where tenants will have access to the support services, but also the physical surroundings will include a dining room, a common room, and a program space. And between this and the 11 Macy site, we're providing supportive homes for 100 residents who had been experiencing homelessness. And a majority of this work occurred in 2020. We did the whole thing in months, not in years. Just last spring, a city council approved the modular housing initiative to build the first 250 modular homes on city-owned land. And this is moving fast because it needs to move fast, because the people that are in need us to move fast. Often these are people who are really struggling, who need housing now. The whole point of modular housing is that it can be built in months and not years, but it requires the sort of front end of all this to be done quickly as well, and means we can get the housing to people with this kind of speed, namely that we did the site selection as a city council, approving these sites, the two sites, the first two, in June, and the first residents are actually moving into the housing. The homes are there, they're moving in with the supports in December and now in January. An important part of the housing is the supportive services that are offered. It ensures that we are building homes for people, true homes, but also doing it in an environment that is stable and permanent for people who have some extra needs in their lives. Both of these housing sites will be managed by the neighborhood group and CODA. And again, as I mentioned at the outset, when I had a chance to meet some of the people involved at the Macy opening, I can just tell you of the expertise, the professionalism, the experience, and the compassion that they bring to the job that they have to do. The neighborhood group will act as the property manager, and COTA will provide the on-site support services, including the meal services, connecting residents to community supports on things like education, employment, health, mental health, addiction counseling, and life skills training. And these are the vital supports that make this supportive housing as opposed to just housing. And when I say just housing, the permanency and stability of this housing is an important thing in and of itself, and the physical quality of the circumstances in which these residents will be provided for. We've also established community liaison committees for both locations to further engage local neighbors and local organizations. And this will help us to continue to maintain an active dialogue and help these residences to become a part of the neighborhood, and help the neighborhood to become a part of these residences, which we found really adds immeasurably to the positive experience of the residents, both groups, the residents who live in the neighborhood now and the new residents who will be coming in. Before I finish, could I just make mention of some of the key people that have helped to make this happen, because building up requires strong partners. To our nonprofit partners like COTA and the neighborhood group, thank you for helping us, and this is not the first time that they have, to make sure that we can provide an environment that is healthy and stable and welcoming. Of course, I want to thank the Government of Canada, and Julie Zarowitz is here as the representative of that government today, but her Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, her Minister, or the Minister of the government that has helped us with this, Ahmed Hussein, and the MPs themselves, including Julie, have been immensely helpful. I've said many times that this is a government that gets cities and that has been a good partner for Toronto. I've also said that if that ever stops being the case, I'll say so. But I don't think there seems to be any need for that, because we've got the Rapid Housing Initiative now proceeding with literally hundreds of millions of dollars coming to Toronto to help us in this very same vein of supportive housing. But in this case, the full capital costs for phase one, which were for the two developments, $20.9 million. The city is covering $12.65 million of that. And where the federal government came in, and I thank them for this, was to help us through the Canada Housing, Mortgage and Housing Corporation's Affordable Housing Innovation Fund, and they committed $8.25 million in grants and recoverable loans. So thank you to the Government of Canada for their participation in this and the creation of much needed supportive and affordable housing in the City of Toronto, another contribution in that regard. The province helped us by responding to a request that we made to expedite this because we were determined. I was certainly very determined, and so I'm prepared to take responsibility for the fact that we needed a quick approval to put modular housing in these two locations and got it. The province understands that if we want to build affordable housing quickly, we need to work together. And this was an example, because I wouldn't necessarily say it's the case, I would say this all the time, of a good example of them using extraordinary powers to deal with what is an extraordinary challenge for our city. And so I thank Parm Gill, and through him, Minister Stephen Clark, and also Premier Ford for that support. Now we have to, frankly, on the theory that the work is never done, we have to work with the province to ensure that there is a commitment for the operating funding to ensure that the supports are there in the supportive housing. It is not just housing, it is healthcare. If you listen to a number of the needs that I talked about that are met by the supports CODA is providing inside these buildings, it is about people's health, their mental health, their health as it regards substance use and things like that. And this kind of operating funding is very much the purview of the province of Ontario, and we're very much looking to receive that support, because we can't have the supportive housing without the supports. I've had good conversations with Minister Steve Clark about this, and I think that he understands the need, and we're continuing to work on that. I also want to recognize, finally, Anna Bailau's work on this, which has just been extraordinary, not just on these projects, where she had to navigate not just the role as deputy mayor and the person that I've asked to be our housing advocate, but also as the local councillor, because it does take some conversation and discussion with the local residents when something new is coming to their neighborhood, and that was true in Scarborough as well. But Anna Bailau has a huge role that she plays every single day in moving forward our plans to build literally thousands, unprecedented amounts in a relatively short period of time of affordable housing and supportive housing. And I want to thank her for her continuing role in that regard and for bringing together all the people around the table that get this done. This development today on Dover Court is not just a temporary place for people to live in. In fact, it's very much not that. It is a group of homes for people to grow in and to be supported in and to get their lives onto a track that they very much want to be on. And that's why I'm very proud of the fact not only that it happened quickly, but that it provides those supports, and that it is but a small portion of what we're going to be building as a city, provided we have the partnership of the other governments to look after literally thousands of people who find themselves, especially post-pandemic, but even before, in need of this kind of help. And on that note, I would like to introduce the MP, Julie Zarowitz, who's a constant fighter for Toronto and a constant advocate on some of our housing needs, among other things, including the arts in particular. But I'd like to thank her for her advocacy and ask her to say a few words this morning.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for that introduction, Mayor Tory. It's an absolute pleasure for me to be here today on behalf of our federal government and the Honourable Minister Ahmed Hussen, the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. And it's great to warmly welcome you, Mayor Tory, you, Deputy Mayor Bailau, and our local city councillor, as well as you, Parliamentary Secretary Parm Gill, to warmly welcome you here virtually in Davenport. I know that we all share the goal of ensuring that every Canadian has access to safe, affordable, and stable housing. Our current events has reminded us more than ever that nothing is more important than a home. As Canadians have done their part to contain the spread of COVID-19, their homes have become a sanctuary, a place of safety and refuge in challenging times. And our federal government has acted quickly in the face of this unprecedented challenge to protect the sanctuary. We've stabilized housing markets by providing mortgage relief and ensuring liquidity so banks can continue to lend. We've invested widely across the economy to support hard-hit industries and businesses, and we help Canadians who are worried about making the mortgage payments or paying their rent. These measures have provided valuable relief to families and to the economy. But all of these measures do nothing to help those who do not have a home or who are precariously housed. And we still have far too many homeless here in Toronto and across our country. They do not have access to safe places to live. They do not have access to supports that they need to help them to gain the stability they need in order to live their lives fully. But ensuring housing affordability for all Canadians isn't a quick fix. We need creative, innovative solutions to create more homes that meet the needs of Canadians that they can afford. And that's why the federal government was proud to announce $18.75 million in funding support for the City of Toronto's Modular Housing Initiative, delivered through Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's Affordable Housing Innovation Fund. The federal government's contribution represents about 40% funding for this project today. This program allows us to quickly build the safe housing stock that is desperately needed in Toronto. And today we're seeing the results of that plan. This new modular supportive housing build at 321 Dovercourt Avenue will provide 44 new homes to those existing shelter system. We are really proud to help fund this initiative because we believe that everyone deserves an opportunity to succeed. And innovative housing solutions are critical to ensure that every Canadian has a safe and affordable place to call home. The Innovation Fund is a key pillar of the federal government's national housing strategy, our 10-year, $70 billion plan to strengthen the middle class, fuel our economy, and give more Canadians a place to call home. The fund helps create inclusive and accessible communities and contributes to the fight against homelessness. The National Housing Strategy is building, renewing, and repairing Canada's stock of affordable housing to meet the housing needs of our most vulnerable citizens. In doing so, it benefits Torontonians and all Canadians. Earlier this month, as part of our federal government's new rapid housing initiative, we also announced an allocation of $200.3 million for the City of Toronto to build 540 new permanent affordable homes, some of which will be modular, much like the project we are celebrating today. What has been achieved here today is a result of collaboration, partnership, and cooperation. And so I want to thank the Ontario government for stepping up to provide the support services to 321 Dovercourt. Housing for the homeless and our vulnerable population is only effective if these supports exist. And I also want to congratulate the City of Toronto for the tireless work that they continue to put forward in making sure every resident in our city has a safe and affordable place to call home. And I do want to echo the comments that you made, Mayor Tory. I want to also say huge thanks to Anna Bailao. I feel really blessed that she's our local city councillor, in addition to being our deputy mayor, in addition to being the champion for affordable housing in our city. You guys are doing an extraordinary job in terms of creating these rapid housings, in terms of transitioning or helping to not so much rebuild, but making sure that our affordable housing that exists right now continues to be safe places for people to live. So thanks so much for your leadership. I also want to say a huge thanks to Paul Bruce, the CEO of Coda Health, and to Bill St. Clair, President and CEO of the Neighborhood Group. I'm really blessed, and I think you said this well, Mayor Tory. They're exceptional people who are providing much needed services in our community, and the quality of their work and the quality of the people that are working within their organizations. We're so blessed to have them in Davenport. And I also want to say a warm welcome to our tenants that are going to be moving in. And I believe that today is, the official, I don't know if it's the official moving day, but hopefully if it's not today, it's will happen shortly. And so I think with that, I will turn it over to Parm Gill, the Parliamentary Assistant to Ontario's Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. I know that today's celebration is something he also holds dear to his heart. It's great to have you with us, Parm. The floor is now yours.
Well, thank you very much, Julie, for that kind introduction. It's great to be with all of you this morning, and I also want to recognize and thank Mayor Tory and also Deputy Mayor Anna Bailao for, this is a fine example of how we can demonstrate as elected officials and, of course, at different levels of government to come together and work together, to support the residents, of course, Torontonians, Ontarians, or Canadians in general. So I'm really honored to be with all of you this morning and to speak today on behalf of the provincial government for this important project. As we all know, this pandemic is impacting our most vulnerable, including those who are homeless or at a risk of becoming homeless. And I know our government's top priority is to ensure every individual and family can find and keep a home that meets their needs and their budget. Innovative projects like this one demonstrate how we can work collaboratively and build safe and affordable homes quickly and efficiently. We fully understand the pressures Toronto and other municipalities are facing regarding their housing and homeless sector, especially during this difficult pandemic. That's why Minister Clark, uses ministerial zoning orders to cut red tape and accelerate constructions of affordable housings through Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan. This is just one tool we have to accelerate critical housing projects for the benefit of municipalities. With respect to this project, the minister, of course, acted quickly in response to a request from the City of Toronto to issue an MZO to ensure this project would move quickly to address the growing needs here in Toronto. Otherwise, it could have taken many, many months to resolve regular planning processes before construction on these homes could begin. Since the onset of the pandemic, we have stood shoulder to shoulder with our municipal partners, and we have made extraordinary investments in communities across the province to help them recover. Through the Safer Restart Agreement, the City of Toronto has been allocated almost $1.5 billion in COVID-related financial assistance, including over $189 million under the Social Services Relief Fund to help expand shelters, purchase PPE, increase funds in Toronto's rent bank, and more. This investment also directly supports innovative long-term housing solutions like new modular housing projects. We will continue to work together, of course, with the City of Toronto and all of our municipal partners so we can keep everyone safe. Until vaccines are widely available, I would like to remind everyone to stay home, stay safe, and save lives. Thank you. And once again, it's truly an honor to be part of this important announcement with all of you.
Thank you, Parliamentary Assistant Parm Gill. And before we turn it over to questions, I would like to share with you some images of the site. Since we can't be there physically together, we wanted to share some images that we've captured. If I could ask for the video to be shared. Thank you. And before we proceed, I just want to say that as we talk throughout the day about mental health issues, because it is Bell Let's Talk Day, we're all on social media, all tweeting, all talking about it. Let's ensure that we also bring light to the solutions and the supports that are needed. And this is a prime example of what governments need to do and invest in solutions to tackle mental health and the supports that we need to bring forward to our residents. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you to all the speakers. We will now open the floor to the media. As a reminder, it's one question, one follow-up. Please unmute yourself when you're called upon. First up, we have Lucas Meyer from News Talk 1010. Go ahead, Lucas.
Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for taking my question. If you don't mind, Mayor, I would like to get your reaction to some breaking news that we're seeing right now. The Ontario government has announced that its vaccination data was wrong. It inadvertently posted total number of doses administered as opposed to full vaccinations. So instead of yesterday when they said 96,000 people were fully vaccinated, it was really closer to 48,000, and the updated data is now 55. So I'm just wondering, obviously this is a provincial situation and not a city one, but just your initial reaction to hearing that news, and also if this will prompt the city to relook at its numbers to make sure that all of its information is correct, as I'm sure you think it is.
Mayor, you'll just need to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry. I think anytime something like this happens, you'll go back and take a look at your numbers. But in our case, we know the people that we were working with the province to vaccinate, who are residents of our own long-term care residences and other long-term care residences and some frontline workers. I think when you're dealing with a massive undertaking like this that will ultimately result in the vaccination of close to 3 million people, there are going to be some hiccups that happen at the beginning, whether it has to do with reporting or information systems or other things. And so I think in the end, everybody's safe, everybody's healthy. A lot of people have been vaccinated, and I think we can just move forward with some of the lessons learned from things like this and make sure that as we get to the mass immunization phase of this a little later on, that we've taken those lessons into account. The bottom line is to get the needles into the arms and get people vaccinated so that we can bring this nightmare to an end.
Thank you, Mayor. And my follow-up question, and again, apologies for changing the subject once again, but on the comments that you made yesterday and this morning with regards to, that starting the conversation around a possible reopening, I'm curious if this will be, kind of, obviously you're going to consult with the province on how that might look, but will the city in any way, as we get closer to that February 10th date, do you see the city or yourself putting out sort of a formal a formal recommendation, a formal suggestion, this is what we think it should look like for our city, or or you purely just consult and really let the province take the lead on that?
The way the system has worked throughout is that a lot of these decisions rest in the hands of the province. And so we've been actively consulted. We sit at various tables. Our medical officer of health does. I speak with the premier and the ministers on a regular basis and make sure that we have our input, which I would say has been, by and large, received quite well. And I'm sure the process will work much the same way, and that the preference here is to have a rollout plan to gradually reopen when the day comes, and we're not there yet. That is satisfactory to the city, and I'm sure if there are any things that aren't addressed by the province's plans as they evolve, that we will take steps to deal with those ourselves. But I would expect you'll hear mostly from the province on this, but that we will work hand in hand with them, as we have very well through the pandemic on a number of matters.
Thanks, Lucas. Next up, we have Momin Qureshi from 680 News. Go ahead, Momin.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for taking my question. Mayor Tory, if I could just go back to the vaccine question and the numbers that Lucas just asked about. I can appreciate that it's just a numbers thing, and really the number of people who have vaccinated is half of what it actually is. But I think the bigger issue here may be that the provincial government and other governments have made some missteps here and there, and that is eroding the trust that people have as this pandemic goes further and further. And I just wanted to know if that's, this is another thing that's happened, and whether that, raises more concerns for you about the fact that people are starting to lose trust and faith in the process that's unfolding here.
The maintenance of public confidence in all of this, the health restrictions that are in place, the handling of the pandemic in many other respects, including, very importantly, the vaccination program, is very, very important. But I think most of the people in the public understand that when you're dealing with a gigantic undertaking to ultimately, say, in the case of Toronto alone, get 3 million people vaccinated, or in the case of Ontario, 14 million people, that there are going to be some hiccups. And I think the test they will apply is, did you acknowledge that there was an error? Did you indicate that you had fixed the problem that led to it? And did you continue to move forward to put the needles in the arms and get people vaccinated? Because that's the main assignment we have here. So you're not going to find me. I mean, I've been in a position of responsibility like this in business and again here in government, and mistakes are made, things happen. And the key is you've got to move forward, learn from what happened, and get the needles in the arms in this case. And that's what we're all very focused on doing, including the city, the federal government, and the provincial government. And I'm sure that there's learnings coming from all this, but that the bottom line is we're going to move forward with a very aggressive vaccination program as soon as the supply is available to bring this nightmare to an end.
And just sort of if I could switch to today is Bell Let's Talk Day. I know that you've talked about it in the past. If you could just talk about maybe your own experiences with mental health and the conversation that has moved into the forefront, especially this year where more and more people are clearly having issues because of the restrictions that are in place.
I've learned a lot. One of the reasons I'm so proud of the supportive housing development that we're opening today on Dovercourt, and one we opened recently in Scarborough with the help of the other governments, is that it provides support for people, because the more time you spend in a position of public responsibility, the more you realize that mental health and substance use issues are at the core of a lot of problems that are desperate problems faced by individual people. And that is a problem in and of itself, but also it's a huge problem for the healthcare system. If you look at the emergency rooms today, and who are in those emergency rooms day after day, sometimes the same people, they're there with mental health problems, which is not what the emergency room was set up to deal with. They deal with them because there is no other place for them to go to get proper, stable housing like they're getting here with this development on Dovercourt, like the kinds of supports that COTA and the neighborhood group will provide for people to help them stabilize their lives. And so we don't focus necessarily on the fact as often as we should, and this is a good day to do that, on how many people, thousands of people in Toronto, either to that extent that they're on the street with huge issues in their lives, or people who are simply suffering alone. In my own case, in my own family, I had both of my grandfathers suffered from depression, and I was young. And I remember going to visit my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, who I loved. He was a hero to me. And when I was a teenager, I would see him lying on the couch all the time. And I would wonder, why is he always lying on the couch? And he was lying on the couch because he was suffering from depression. And he fortunately got some help with that. But in the end, no family is left untouched by this. There are thousands of young people. There are many more thousands of people who have suffered during the pandemic and experience they've never had before with anxiety and mental health concerns. Our phone number at 211 that we set up to deal with this, and staffed by wonderful professionals from different community organizations, has had over 110,000 calls from people seeking help with their mental health. And so if that doesn't tell you that there's a huge problem and a huge need out there, nothing will. And so this is just one day we focus on this, thanks to the efforts of Bell and many people who support it by making phone calls and texting and so on. But we should be thinking about this every day and doing a much better job of destigmatizing this and putting the treatments in place so people don't have to be homeless, and so they don't have to be in emergency rooms, places where, yes, they get some help, but they don't get the kind of help they need to get their lives completely back on track.
Thank you. Next up, we have Nick from CBC. Go ahead, Nick.
Hi, thanks. And for Mayor Tory and Councillor Bilau on the modular housing, can you tell me what your vision is, maybe long term, for how widespread you think this solution could be? Like how many modular housing sites you think the city could have, and what could that play in the overall housing strategy?
I'll let Deputy Mayor Bilau start with that.
Well, in terms of the modular, the city has committed in its housing plan to have 1,000 done. So we're well over that, well into that. We've approved 250. Very soon we'll be announcing 3 other sites for phase 2, and part of the rapid rehousing will be also some modular. So our target is to build 1,000 modular homes as part of our housing plan. This is something that speeds the process of construction. And as you know, the housing plan also has committed and as a target for 18,000 units of supportive housing. So the need is so great that we put these two together, and it works really well to have this kind of construction being part of that supportive housing delivery. Of course, it is key that we get the supports as well, which is very much part of the healthcare system. And obviously, this is something that we're constantly appealing to the provincial government, because it needs to be part of the solution. It's not only about the bricks and mortars, it is also very much so about the support services. That's how we guarantee that people will be housed successfully.
And may I just make one more comment? That was, of course, a very complete answer, as I would have expected, no less. There is a strong business case, for people who may not place as much stock in the moral case for dealing with this, because you have people here who are incredibly marginalized and isolated in their lives with very special issues confronting them. It is actually way cheaper way cheaper for the governments working together to deliver this kind of support to people than to have them in a shelter. The kinds of numbers that we put forward in seeking funding assistance from the other governments for these projects, these particular kinds of projects, these modular housing projects, is $3,000 a day or thereabouts to look after somebody all in a shelter circumstance, which is, we all have to admit, is not entirely satisfactory in terms of all the other supports that don't go with that, versus maybe just in excess of $2,000 to actually provide for a more stable home with a full range of supports. And so, and the reason that can be a good business arrangement is because you don't have some of the same people appearing as often in emergency rooms, or having to be dealt with and having encounters with the police because the police get called because these people are in distress in some way. It is just a better way to do this, and it makes financial sense as well as making humane sense from the standpoint of trying to help some people who are really struggling.
And again, for Mayor Tory, Dr. Davila is looking for an extension of some of the bylaws that have been in place to stop the spread of COVID. From what you know in briefings and the other information that you have access to, are there certain measures that you think the city has taken that would be sort of maybe first on the list for being lifted if things continue to go well? Are there certain measures that have been more effective than others? How are you going to sort of look at that sort of overall suite of bylaws that are in place?
We've just begun the planning process for that, and what we really don't want to do is get ahead of ourselves on this and start telling people what bylaws are going to be lifted first, when we still have a big job to do getting these numbers down. I often mention that in August, we were, very gratified at the fact that on several days there were new case numbers below 100. And now we've got to be careful we don't become too optimistic when the number is around 500 or 600. And yes, it's down from where it was at a very unacceptable and very scary kind of peak a couple of weeks ago. But we've got to keep it down, and we've got to push it down much, much further. So we're starting that planning work because it's prudent to do so, to talk with the provincial government, to look at our own bylaws and look at what's going to be the best for the community in terms of both public health and getting business going again and helping individuals with their lives. But we've got a big job to do, finishing off the job of vanquishing this virus and, the variants that we know so little about at this stage that pose a threat to us as well.
Thank you, Nick. And next up, we have Jennifer from the Star. Go ahead.
Hi there. I just wanted to follow up on Nick's question about the extension of the bylaws. It might be difficult for people who are sort of thinking about this in the short term, hoping that the current lockdown comes to an end, and hearing that certain rules will be extended through the summer might be challenging for them, especially seeing, the pace of the vaccinations that Lucas mentioned. Can you just speak to the need to continue these through the summer and probably beyond that?
Well, this is the work we're going to be doing, and with the planning for the reopening. And my guess is the reopening will happen much as it did in the spring, in the sense that if you go back and remember that time, we didn't go from lockdown to fully open in one day or 1 week. It took a number of weeks for that to happen, which probably did end up being a couple of months. And I would think that the experience this time is going to be no different, and that's for mainly public health reasons. In that, what you don't want to do is go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour and find that what you do by doing it that way is lead to a third or a fourth wave. And so we're just beginning the planning work. We are really anxious to get people to keep their eye on the ball of staying home and staying away from crowds and only socializing with people they live with, and continuing with that because we've really just started to see the fruits of that. And we will then plan on a gradual basis. I mean, I'm optimistic we can get back to some elements of a more normal life by the summer, but that's still very conditional upon things getting better over the next few weeks, so that we can then put in place a reopening plan that will go out the next few months. And it's just too early to say, well, which things are going to happen when, because first of all, we're not there yet, and secondly, that planning work has just really begun.
And then can I just ask you about the budget? Obviously, we're still at an early stage. I know I saw you at several of public presentations. There was an overwhelming number of presentations, I think in kind of 3, about police spending, climate change, overall equity issues. It's been raised that while the city is able to maintain existing services, which are obviously important, that there kind of reinvestment and additional investment that is going to be needed to pull people who are already disadvantaged out of this economic downturn and through the pandemic. And I wonder how you respond to that this budget doesn't go far enough for those people.
Well, one of the reasons we put the budget out there for a degree of public consultation is to identify things that the public think we need to take a second look at. And I think there are some, not only some measures that we might end up taking as the budget gets finalized, but I think just as importantly, I think we've got to make sure we lay out for people the full measure of what we're doing. This very announcement today, for example, which is a small portion of what we're doing to address the affordable and supportive housing issue, very much fits within investments this city government is making. We're making unprecedented investments in Toronto community housing, both operating and capital. We're making unprecedented investments. We total it all up, and it does come actually to hundreds of millions of dollars of the support we give, which doesn't show itself per se in the budget because it's forgiven taxes and forgiven charges that go out many years to make the housing affordable. To an unprecedented extent in terms of both the charges we're waiving and deferring and giving up on, but also the number of units of housing that's involved there. So I think that, we have a story to tell, and we're doing a number of things this year. This is the toughest budget year the city has ever faced in its entire history, period, full stop. Never before has a mayor and council been faced with a situation where we lost virtually overnight, and then for a long period of time, hundreds of millions of dollars from transit and other sources of revenue. And so we're going to be, and I think it should be taken note of, that the areas that deal with equity deserving groups are the areas that got an increase this year, whereas other areas of the city government were faced with having to make do with what they had last year, and sometimes less. But we did that without cutting services. So I think people are very fair-minded because they don't want cuts in services and they don't want big increases in taxes. And I think that they're very fair-minded about understanding that we're doing our very best to address the equity concerns that exist and the many other things that we're expected to do, including just the delivery of basic services we've continued to do through the pandemic and will continue to do after.
That's it for today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, team. Good announcement. Many more to come.
Thank
Bye.
you.